yesterday evening on the football field. If you haven't seen it, listen, he's just regular, ordinary sort of a tackle. And what happens next is he gets up after the tackle and then just pitches over backwards. They rush out the medical staff. They're working on him CPR for like 8, 9 minutes. And they even used a ventricular defibrillator, and ambulance came, took him away. And last we heard, he was in the hospital in very serious, if not critical condition. And that's all I know as of this time. But what I wanted to talk to you about today was there's a lot of misinformation going out there. And when I went to Twitter this morning to find out what was going on, what I saw was just an absolute wall of misinformation out there, or maybe disinformation or deflection. So let's take it piece by piece. First thing that we saw was that a lot of folks, a lot of doctors out there are saying that this is something called commotio cordis. You go to Wikipedia, you look at that. This is something that happens when somebody gets a blow to their heart at a critical moment during the heart rhythm cycle. And if that happens, it can cause the heart to go into ventricular fibrillation, obviously a very medically dangerous moment in time for that to happen. And if you go into ventricular fibrillation, if you don't get immediate help, or even if you do, the chance of dying is very, very high. So what really happened? Well, let's talk this through. Commotio cordis itself is a very rare condition. Now, when I go to YouTube, I see lots of doctors, MDs, very irresponsibly saying, hey, we're pretty sure that this was commotio cordis. It's consistent with it. That must be what happened, including saying this did not happen because of the vaccine. So they were declaratively stating this didn't happen, but maybe this is why. So let's break it down really quickly. We have exactly, as of yesterday, 0 incidents in history that I could find through reasonably extensive searching of this ever happening in professional football before. Through all of history, up through when the records that I saw that were up through 2001, so a lot can have happened in the last 20 years, but up through 2001, there had been about 140 different cases, less than that, I think 138, somewhere in there, but less than 150 cases of identified, certified commotio cordis ever, right? And most of those happened in baseball. Almost all of those happened in young boys with an average age of about 13.9 years because the young chest is undeveloped and it doesn't have a lot of protection. And so what happens is something happening really fast, like a baseball coming in at line drive. And when we see the baseball come flying in, it can actually hit and hurt people in that way. So hey, that's what's possible here. All right, so I'm going to turn this vertical now. Get this going this way. See if this for people. Getting some clues. I ought to go vertical on this. All right, you are now seeing the complete total of my my studio here. So what happens when somebody actually gets hit like that? Well, their heart has if you look at an EKG of a heart, there are different waveforms in there. There's a very, very critical window that can happen for just one part of this overall cycle, and that's in the P wave when the ventricle is trying to repolarize itself. If you get hit right then during this 20 millisecond window, your heart can actually go into a fibrillation state. So that's pretty bad if that actually does happen. Now, this is kind of inconsistent with what we saw happen on the football field because tackles happen over a very, relatively long time cycle compared to a 20-second window. And as well, what we're going to see is, learn is that there have been in all of recorded history through the time they started looking at this, there were, I think, 5 recorded cases of this happening during football play ever. So this is all kinds of scrimmages. This is recreationally, but not during the NFL. So it's very rare. But second of all, when we look at what the pads that NFL players wear, these things are really aggressively good at preventing all sorts of injuries, particularly around the chest and the chest area. So it's rare. It's exceedingly rare. So for all the doctors out there saying, we know for sure this couldn't have been due to the vaccination, but it was due to this commotio cordis, that is a very irresponsible thing to say. So normally, here's what we should be expecting at some time like this. We're going to wait for the data to come in. We're going to wait for more information before we start
discarding any particular things. You can neither include nor exclude anything from what's called your differential. The differential is a series of steps you would take in medicine to try and rule things in, rule things out. And in the differential, we might include we. I'm being told to get this thing back this way. All right, we'll go this way now. All right, so here's the differential I would particularly run at this particular point in time. And we would say, okay, it could have been commotio cordis. That's a possibility here. It could have been that because somebody. No. So you're telling me. Late text. All right, we're going back. We're going back to this way, and we're going to see if we can just get this, hold this here like this. All right. You're welcome, Mike. So here's a differential I would run. It's possible it could be commotio cordis. Can't rule that out. It could have been that because of just random bad luck, bad timing. It was the right hit, the wrong hit at the right time, the wrong time, however you think about that. It could have been commotio cordis because the wrong hit at the wrong time coupled to other existing damage to the heart. They could have been caused by a vaccine, could have been caused by COVID itself, could have been caused by an undetected a genetic malformation or some sort of cardiomyopathy that had gone undetected. Now, I weight those less, and I'll tell you why. These NFL players undergo extensive testing, and obviously they're testing for heart function. The hearts get imaged. So the idea that this guy, that Damar had some kind of undiagnosed genetic malformation or other cardiomyopathy is pretty low, I would think. So we would float that down our differential table a little bit. Now, we do know that there are lots and lots of people who've had really extraordinary bad incidents on the field, and it's been really strong this year with hundreds of separate cases of people either pitching over, having extraordinary breathing difficulty or cardio issues on the field, many of them unfortunately dying. So that has been a big part of 2021, 2022. The data's there. It's way above baseline. And if we lived in a happy, healthy society, what we would be seeing is the medical authorities investigating every possibility with equal vigor until they understood what was going on. Again, the differential I would run is it some form of COVID, long COVID? Is it part of the vaccine injury? Both of those have the spike protein. The spike protein itself is a very toxic substance. So we know that's all just part of data at this point in time. Or it could have been something completely different that we don't know about, and we would just have to wait for that data to come in. However, for all the people out there and all the doctors, and I've seen them trotted out on NPR and CNN, there's this wall of people talking about how it's commotio cordis at this stage. It's clearly too early to say that. And they're ruling things in and ruling things out. And that is very irresponsible. It's not science, it's science. So I want to make sure that we're really clear about what we know and what we don't know. Now, having dug through the data, this commotio cordis, it's a thing. It's exceedingly rare. In all of history, maybe a few hundred cases of it at this point in time. In all of history in the NFL, we have 0 cases of it having been identified. Now, could have happened and we didn't know about it, but we haven't seen that actually happen yet in the data. So this would be a first. We don't know the status beyond that at this point in time, but I just wanted to be really clear that what we're talking about is science and that we have good data behind our suppositions at this point. Now, of the hundreds and hundreds of people who have pitched over and died, unfortunately, many of them on the sports fields, I'm not aware of having any particular investigations that have been unleashed from our health authorities, not the CDC. I've heard about in Europe that they're actually passing a law. I think the Dutch are passing a law to prevent any sort of inquiry into exactly this sort of a thing. Now, why you would feel like you need to prevent that from being discussed, I don't know. Somebody here is just texting in on chat saying that he was fully vaccinated. I don't know that for sure, but we do know that there was a heavy promotion within the NFL to make sure that everybody was vaccinated. So that was the odds probably are in that favor, but I don't know that for sure yet. If somebody has that data, hey, share it in here. I'd love to take a look at that. Hey, somebody wants to know about my blue carbon fiber guitar. Hey, that's an awesome guitar. It is carbon fiber. It's a unibody, and it never goes out of tune because it's not subject to humidity. I love that thing. So we do need to get to the truth. We deserve to get to the truth. We are getting very close to what I'm calling common knowledge. Well, not me. I learned this from Ben Hunt of Epsilon Theory letters. He writes about game theory. Common knowledge is when everybody knows that everybody knows something. And once that happens, phase changes happen. You find all of a sudden you can talk about things that you couldn't talk about before. And the goal of whoever it is that wants to keep us in the dark, they want to keep us out of common knowledge. They want to keep us stuck in private knowledge. Now, private knowledge doesn't mean something only you know. You and I could share private knowledge, and you and I and everybody in this room could share this private knowledge, but it's not common knowledge until everybody knows that everybody knows the same thing. And you'll know that you get to common knowledge when you can say something out loud on the bus and other people either don't react or they nod or they don't give you a sideways evil stink eye glance, right? So if we talked about something like said, uh, JFK, I believe, was not killed by a lone gunman, right? 5, 10, 20 years ago, you say that, you get the stink eye. Today, less so, right? Because it's getting to be common knowledge that, oh, yeah, something really weird happened. And if you saw, there's been some releases around that of late. So what do we need to do? We need to get to common knowledge where it's okay for you and I to ask questions, and we should expect answers to those questions. Now, Ben Hunt, he wrote a great piece of a series of articles on common knowledge, and the way he put that out, the common knowledge parable out there in our lives is the emperor has no clothes. In that story, in that fable, this emperor gets a tailor who makes him a very fine set of clothes, and of course he's just a bullshitter, so he's giving him clothes that have nothing, and the finest clothes ever. They're actually transparent. That's how fine they are, and everybody can see that with their own eyes. They have everybody in the audience when the emperor is parading down the street with their nakedness. Everybody can see that, but that's private knowledge. It became common knowledge when the child yells out, "The emperor has no clothes," and then all of a sudden all that private knowledge converted into common knowledge. And that's how it goes. Another example that Ben pointed out is Harvey Weinstein, right? This guy is doing bad things to starlets. He's been doing it for decades. Everybody knows it. He's still got a wife. He's still invited to, foundation dinners at the Clinton Foundation. He's hanging out with all the hoi polloi, and nobody's saying anything about it until finally Rose McGowan comes out and says, hey, this guy is a bad dude, and here's why. And the next thing you know, now it's common knowledge, and all of a sudden DAs are charging him with crimes, and people are backing away, and he's getting divorced, and all kinds of things are happening. What happened in between the day before Rose McGowan said that and the day after? Did anybody's private knowledge change? Did anybody's knowledge of who this guy really was change? And the answer is no. What happened was private knowledge got converted into common knowledge. So that's the game we're in right now. And we are this close to common knowledge breaking out about this event. So something big and public, like what happened, this tragedy that happened to Damar Hamlin, like this has happened to hundreds of other athletes, but tens of thousands of other people, if not hundreds of thousands. This is a big deal. So this is being talked about more and more. And if you saw, we had a Rasmussen poll come out just yesterday, I think it was. I saw it on January 2nd. So yeah, it came out very recently, where they asked the question of, 1,000 people out there and said, hey, what do you think the chances are that you know somebody who's been vaccine injured or maybe has died? And the answer was surprising, with fully about a quarter of all people, just a little over a quarter, saying that they knew somebody personally, right? And it was very interesting how this poll broke out, because it was very clearly true that there was a gap in perception between people who were unvaccinated versus vaccinated, with the unvaccinated people a little bit more, not surprisingly, willing to entertain the idea that maybe these things could be harming people. Of course, that makes sense, right? Buyer's remorse. Like if you've been vaccinated, you wouldn't want to think those things. So that all makes sense. maybe not surprising, but possibly a little more surprising is the degree to which there was a partisan divide in this particular story set, with Republicans and independents equally likely to believe that maybe the shots have been harmful versus Democrats, who were very much more unlikely to believe that the shots could be harmful. Even with that, what was really surprising was that more Democrats than Republicans thought they knew somebody who had been vaccine injured or died from it. And not surprising once you understand that about 85% of Democrats are vaccinated versus about 63% of Republicans. So, how do you tie that all together? Because if Democrats know more of their friends, if Democrats hang out with Democrats more often and more of them are vaccinated, the chance of them actually knowing somebody who's been injured is much higher. So that's how you would parse through that data. Now, congratulations to Rasmussen for even running that poll. Most pollsters wouldn't touch that. That's a really important poll for a couple of reasons. One, it may be giving us a signal here that we need to look at for sure. That's something that the CDC, the FDA in the United States, their equivalents in every other country, they would use that signal to then say, wow, there's something here we really need to go and look at. And they would take that and go out and start actually doing their jobs and figuring out what the hell's going on. They haven't done that so far. Obviously, they've destroyed their own credibility, and this is going to be a thing that is going to haunt them pretty much forever. As well, that's what the whole VAERS system was supposed to be. Most people get this all wrong, and I've seen a lot of debunking, and of course, you got to fact check the fact checkers. All the PolitiFacts, the Reuters, the AP out there busy telling us that we can't use the VAERS data for anything. Let me rewind. Once upon a time, vaccine injuries were understood to be a thing, and they are a thing, and that's just part of life. There's all sorts of, that's not relegated to just vaccines. Drugs interfere with the biological functioning of systems, hopefully for the better, but sometimes not. And being injured through a pharmaceutical product is a thing, right? And so in order to make sure that the pharma companies were willing to continue down the path of creating vaccines, because for the greater good, there's an argument around that was being made at the time, they wanted to get some liability protection. But they had just come through this horrible incident with a vaccine that had gone through, I think it was the DPT, pretty sure that was it. I have to look that up. But at any rate, this vaccine had some bad batches. And so in order to shield the pharma companies from liability on one hand, but also to make sure that we would be able to detect if something bad was happening, VAERS was created specifically to find safety signals. It wasn't ever created to prove causation. That's not how it was designed. You would design a completely different system for that. But VAERS was there to say, hey, we need a sentinel system. We need a way of finding out how, if there's a bad signal out there. And a bad signal would be you suddenly start seeing lots of people showing up with specific injuries, or they're clustered in a region, and you can chase that down and you can see that it's actually, that's where certain batches went. So it's there to detect, A, if there's any larger thing you couldn't find in the clinical trials, and B, if there's anything to bad manufacturing or other pieces like that, if there's a lot problem. That's how it was created. And obviously that's what it's supposed to do, is, help us figure that stuff out. So that's exactly what people have been saying has been showing up in the VAERS system. That's what the same sort of safety signal we think we would see when we look at the tenfold increase, roughly, it looks like, of healthy young people dying during sporting events or getting, collapsing. That's a signal. Again, it doesn't prove causation. I'm absolutely in violent agreement with anybody saying it's too early to say what any of this is specifically due to. My differential includes all different kinds of things on that list, and we would very cautiously go through each of those. But first, you have to look for this stuff. You have to be willing. You have to have a certain appetite and eagerness to go out and research this stuff. But what you can't do is the gaslighting that we've been subject to, which is to say, oh, you can't say that system proves anything. Obviously, wasn't designed to do that. But if the people who designed the system not to be prove causation are the same people who then don't fund any additional studies to look into the stuff that's popping out of that safety signal system, and then come out later and gaslight you and say there are no studies to prove causation, but they're the ones who didn't fund them. You see the catch-22 loop we've been caught in here? That's the gaslighting loop we've been caught in. And that's the one that I want to short circuit here today, talking about this absolute wall of commotio cordis out there that's just all over my Twitter feed, other places, it's in the news, and you can feel there's a really strong concerted effort to try and push this story out there, even though we know for a fact the incidence rate of myocarditis and pericarditis in men, in young men in particular, in response to these vaccines is many orders of magnitude higher than the incidence rate of commotio cordis. So from a differential standpoint, just playing the odds, you would say one of these things is rarer than the other. That's where this whole story ought to start. In a proper differential always starts with things that are stacked at the top on down in terms of likelihood, right? So if I'm here in Massachusetts and I suddenly come down with a fever, and I would hope my doctor wouldn't be spending a lot of time trying to figure out if I have malaria or not, because the incidence likelihood of that here in Massachusetts very low. But if they saw my travel records and found out I had just come back from West Africa, maybe they would bump that up a little bit higher. Or if I was in a hospital in West Africa, maybe that would bump up right to the top of the list, right? So that's how a differential should run. What is most likely? What do we know for sure? And how can we start to exclude things? This whole idea of elevating commotio cordis to the top of the list for somebody of Damar's age, physical conditioning, and who was wearing chest padding is, it's not even like this is a rare outcome. This is a statistically exceedingly improbable outcome. And so therefore, the burden of proof before people start, wielding that, they would have to say why they think that's the case, or why this is more likely than some other thing that might have happened, right? So just want to make sure we're clear about that. I love science. I love data. And I want to make absolutely clear that we're only ever really looking at what we can know for sure, and that we're excluding things in a organized, dare I say, common sense kind of an approach. So, hey, somebody asking here, the jab believe it saved them though. Well, yeah, it's proving a negative though. And I did get in trouble. I got a strike on this channel a while ago because I actually pulled up a quote from Fauci saying exactly that. He said, I credit this vaccine with making my symptoms very, very mild. I thought that was wonderful, but I could have easily have said the same thing, and maybe I'll get in trouble for it again, or maybe things are looser now. We'll find out. That I could also credit the same thing as somebody who is unvaccinated and say, oh, I credit that with why I had a mild case. Both of them don't count. So those are anecdotes. They don't really matter. And by the way, the data says that that's what the odds would suggest anyway, because we already knew even at the beginning of COVID that 40% of people either were completely asymptomatic or somehow didn't even get this thing, even despite they were exposed. And I'm sure you know people like this, never had it, don't think they ever had it, don't have antibodies to it. What happened? So those people, we already knew that they were part of the landscape to begin with. And secondarily, we know there's a bell curve response, and some people get it very, very bad, but a lot of people just don't get it bad at all. And we just had paper just came out last week, end of 2022, from John Ioannidis out of Stanford, talking about how the infection fatality rate across all the countries when they pooled them all for people who were in Damar's age range was this. Well, let me put the survival rate. The survival rate for people in Damar's age range across the whole experience so far was 99.999% if you had an infection. So that's different from a case fatality rate, remember. Of course, they bollocksed all these numbers up badly for us and blurred them badly. But a case fatality rate is when you have symptoms bad enough requiring medical care. And then, of course, you get different numbers. But from an infection standpoint, 99.999% survival rate for somebody in Damar's age range, which again would raise the question of, from a risk-benefit standpoint, why are we doing what we're doing? Yeah, somebody just wrote in that I saw the comment fly by that Ioannidis was one of the early realists in this story. Absolutely, he was. I'm ashamed to say, when he first came out with that first IFR way back in the day, I didn't buy it at the time. I thought he was way underplaying this, and I didn't Yeah, I didn't get that one right at all. So I've since come to realize he had it dead right the whole way through. So I elevate him way higher in my pantheon of people I listen to more carefully now as we go forward. So yeah, comment here. If Hamlin wasn't jabbed, we would know. I believe that's the case. You're playing that game exactly right. We know that when things break in the favor of the mainstream narrative, we tend to find out about those things really fast. And when they don't, we don't find out about them at all, or very, very slowly. And so, yeah, sorry to everybody who's typing in here about your own experiences with this particular being jabbed. Sorry about that. I really do feel that this is it's been a very unfortunate experiment, but now it's time for common knowledge to break out. Now it's time for the truth to get out there. Now it's time for the great understanding to finally come forward. It's time for us to stand up, and those of us who can, we need to stand up and just let our voices be heard on this whole thing. We really do. We know that when I interviewed Matthias Desmet and we talked about mass formation, he called it mass psychosis. It was otherwise called that we're in a very unusual period of history where we're going through one of these events where, oddly enough, the people who are most likely to be caught up in the mass formation are actually some of the most educated people. I have my theory for that. I think it's because a lot of people who go through the education system, they've wrapped their identity around being smart. They've wrapped their identity around being smarter than other people. They've wrapped their identity around not being easily fooled. And so when your ego, when your ID, self ID is really wrapped up within a story of self, it can be hard to admit that that might not be accurate. It could be complete BS. So I think that we're seeing that particular piece carry out right now. But I am really shocked at how slowly we're seeing the dawning awareness come forward. I'm really shocked at how people are able to resist what they see with their own eyes. But this is what the Damar Hamlin case really just brought forward. It's like, it's right there. It's right there in front of millions of eyeballs for everybody to see. This is not right. And if you're my age, I can think back to watching lots and lots and lots of sports through my decades and not ever seeing that exact thing before. And now it's pretty common. In fact, somebody who works for me was just taking a flight back recently from the holidays. And at the end of their flight, which went from LA back to the East Coast, a 40-year-old woman-ish was starting to walk off the plane and collapsed right there on the spot. And they had to hold everybody up, and they brought a stretcher down, put this woman on a stretcher, and took her out. And I think everybody watching that was just like, what is this? What just happened in front of our eyes? Now, things like that happened before, but now they seem to happen too often, and we should know why. That's all. We should just know what the heck is going on here. And if anything, yeah, we should really, I guess this is what disturbs me most. We're not looking into this stuff. By we, I mean the authorities. Like where's the curiosity? Where's the burning drive to understand what's happening? Where's the inquiry? Where's the spirit of saying we need to follow the data wherever it leads, even if that's a place that's uncomfortable for us or makes me feel, like I did a bad job if I'm in that particular position. I think that it's time for us to demand more. It's time for us to admit we have a problem. It's right there for everybody to see. We're this close to breaking out into common knowledge, and I think we just need to own up to that at this point in time. It's way past time, actually. We should have done this a couple of years ago. We're going to find out a lot of uncomfortable things as time goes on. We're going to find out that it was a mistake to organize these particular vaccines around the full-length spike protein itself. We're going to find out that sometimes you shouldn't rush. We're going to find out that the Great Barrington Declaration, the Ioannidis crowd were right all along. We're going to find out that maybe we should have age stratified the risk of this thing. We should have age stratified our response to this whole thing. We should have spent our time trying to figure out how to be as as cautious as we could about this whole thing. So, hold on. Come on back to me. All right, folks. Well, it looks like my phone has decided it's got to flip this way for now. Beats me. Hey, this has been an absolute. This has been distressing, obviously, and not just that it was, a sports figure and it was so publicized. I mean, I've been distressed all the way along about everything I've been seeing going on, and I truly think that it's a big giant. This has been a disaster in many respects. So many people have lost their lives, and I think unnecessarily. And I think we have to answer to that. So, thanks very much for being here today. I got to run, but we'll keep doing this, and I promise I'll get my technology all worked out next time. All right? Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye.